something new today. How's that? As chair of Division 2 of the House Finance Committee, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, and in accordance with House Rule 67 and the governor's emergency order number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. This public meeting is pertaining to, HB 594 FN and HB 613 FNL. If there is time following these two issues, we will be looking at HB1 and HB2. Please note that there is no physical location for members of the public to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting. However, in accordance with the emergency order, I am confirming that all members of the committee and select legislative staff have the ability to communicate contemporaneously during this meeting through the Zoom electronic meeting platform, and the public has access to contemporaneously listen and, if necessary, participate in this meeting by the Zoom platform or by telephone. All necessary access information has been made available in the House calendar and through the electronic calendar on the General Court website. The notice for this meeting complies with House rules and RSA 91-A. Anyone who has a problem accessing this meeting should email lba_fiscal@leg.state.nh.us. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting will be adjourned and rescheduled. LBA staff are on the meeting assisting us. Please note that all votes that are taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call vote. Let's start the meeting by taking a roll call attendance. When each member states their presence, please also state whether there is anyone in the room with you during this meeting, which is required under the right to know law. Representative Lynn, if you would take attendance, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Porter.
I'm here in my home in Hillsborough. I'm alone in the room, but my husband and cats are in the house.
Thank you. Representative Turcott.
I'm home in Barrington by myself in this room. My wife is in the house somewhere.
Thank you. Representative Heath.
Good morning, Mary Heath here in Manchester, in my home, and my husband is just leaving, so I'll be home alone shortly.
Thank you. I'm Bob Lynn. I'm here alone at my home in Wyndham. I'm sorry. I'm here in the room alone in my home in Wyndham. My wife is elsewhere in the house. Representative Murray.
Good morning. So Kate Murray here in Newcastle. The dog's here. David is in the next room right now. He'll be heading down outside later.
Thank you. Representative Petrie.
Right. Representative Petrie is here in Concord in the finance offices, the little ante room off of the break room.
All right. Thank you. And Representative Umberg.
Yes, I'm in my home in Kearsarge, and my husband is in the house.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Representative Lynn. I do want to mention that at 1 o'clock today, we're having our public hearing on HB1 and HB2. And I'm sure, like all of you, we have received probably 100 emails with testimony attached to it. And so I have absolutely no idea how long this public hearing is going to last this afternoon. The other thing that I wanted to point out is that there are several people that don't realize that the Finance Committee works differently than the other committees, in that the LBA is the office that takes care of the things that we do. And so if anyone you talk to is having trouble or whatever, on the General Court website, they have a list of all of the committee meetings that are going on that day. And you can click on Finance 2 and the Zoom connection will come up. So it's, I probably had, I don't know, 4 or 5 different people saying, I can't get in, I can't get in, I can't do this. So just make sure that people that you're talking to are aware that this is how you get to finance. And for our meetings tomorrow and Thursday, that will be the access point for those meetings. So there we have it. And I just wanted to make sure that everybody understands, you know, what's happening here. So our the first bill that we're going to look at this morning is, excuse me, 594, excuse me. An act relative to the school building aid program. Mickey, is there anyone in the participants area that has their hand raised?
I've got Representative Cahill, who's a co-sponsor here, and he's been brought in to speak.
Okay.
I have Amy Clark from the Department of Education. I'll bring her in. And I also have Representative Hill and looks like former Representative Dan McGuire is here too with their hands raised. I'm not sure if they are here to speak on 594 or 613, but it's up to you if you want me to bring everybody in now.
I know that Dan McGuire, I believe, wants to speak on both of them.
Okay.
So if you could bring him up. I'm not positive, but I think if I remember the email I got a while ago, that's what he.
I'll bring Representative Hill in as well, and then just so he's prepared when we get to whenever he wants to participate.
Okay, that'll be fine. That'll be fine. Okay, Representative Cahill, would you like to start with the bill?
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'll just, for the benefit of the public, I'll just briefly read the written testimony I sent you last night, and then talk about a few of the supporting documents. So HB 594, as passed by the Education Committee, would begin to address the needs of schools on the waiting list and implement a 10-year plan to enable better management for the state and school districts. We know the need for improvements will be ongoing, much like the other SBA, the State Bridge Aid, which has a waiting list of over 250 red list municipal bridges. We cannot allow our school buildings to decline or to place the entire cost of renovations on property taxpayers. A 10-year plan is just a plan unless it is funded in the budget every year. The state, with a few exceptions, has not contributed to the cost of school district projects since 2010, and many communities such as mine were denied even the ability to apply for school building aid. This was not because the projects were unnecessary for wants rather than needs, but because the legislature would not fund the program. When I spoke with Governor Sununu last week, he said he wished the legislature would restore funding, that he had to work around it when allocating funds for security infrastructure in the wake of the school shootings. I want you to pass HB 594-FN, but also want you to consider what was removed, the retroactive funding and the return to annual bond payments. Let's look at the project recently approved by the voters in Allenstown. If you don't pass this bill, this $32.5 million project will be added to the list of those without state funding. If you pass the bill using the 80-20 payment method, 15.6 million for this single project would use half of the available 32 million. That's 50 million in the bill minus the debt, the tail. So what then for the schools ranked a little lower, a little further down the list? How many of these will be able to wait 2, 4, or 10 years to rise to the top? Among the documents I'm submitting for your consideration and the record is a summary of the bond for the Newmarket project. This illustrates 2 points. One, we're paying 25 million in interest on the $39 million project over 29 years. Two, we're paying an additional $3.15 per thousand until 2046. This is on our property taxes. This would perhaps be $1 less if we had our 30% grant paid annually. So while there would have been savings over using the 80-20 method, receiving a portion of over the life of the bond is preferable to no state funding. I ask you to consider doing something retroactively, perhaps 50% of what the grants would have been for the affected communities. This could be spread over a number of years, as I would not want to delay work on the pending projects. However, I feel it is wrong to punish those whose projects were the victims of bad timing. Please also redirect the 30 million in the governor's proposed school infrastructure fund to the school building aid program, which has served us well for decades. So again, talking about we have a long waiting list of schools. Schools that couldn't even apply, schools that were done during the moratorium. And I'm looking at the document that Ms. Clark sent. I asked her to send a list of the projects in chronological order, and she noted that these are not approved, or it's an incomplete list. This is a result of a survey, because we don't really track buildings. This is what the schools have told us. But I note that one is absent. I think the first victim of the moratorium was the Stevens High School in Claremont that missed the margin by 1 vote. Someone stayed home to watch Dancing with the Stars instead of casting a ballot. But that was a project, I think it was 25 million, and then they couldn't get the vote. They didn't win. So a couple of years later, they came back with a much smaller project, but again, they had to pay the entire cost. So this list projects, let's see, from Salem to, we have Nashua, we have the Mascoma Regional School, we have Wyndham, projects in Hampton, all over the state. And so this is not just about my community, this is about your communities, and this is about education, something that's important to the young families we hope to move to New Hampshire, and the businesses that would employ them if they had the workforce. We can't just continue to attract seniors who made their money elsewhere and now want to buy a house and not bring kids. We do need the future workforce, the current and future workforce. Also, I sent the list of that the Education Department has submitted to the School Building Authority. There are 12 schools on the list, and then the supporting documents behind that. And then some of these have structural integrity issues, fire and safety, plumbing, all sorts of problems. It's not just the wind that they like a new building because the old one's getting tired. It's structural and safety issues. It's overcrowding. Looking again at that list of projects, some of them I think probably really shouldn't get building aid. I think if you're making energy improvements, the cost savings are enough of an incentive. And I know that some schools are now doing the power sharing so that they're able to have they're able to lease the solar units or whatever it is that lowers their energy costs. And they can't get, the municipalities can't get the benefit, all the benefits. So another entity, third party comes in, and we still get the cheaper energy, and it's saving us money. And I think also the program needs to be tweaked in that we shouldn't be paying for a new gym floor or perhaps even a new furnace. Those are maintenance items, and the towns should be putting something aside in the budget every year, because a roof, a boiler, they have a lifespan, and over time you could put something aside. But renovations, we needed renovations. I sent you this morning. I sent you the testimony I offered to the Education Committee, which included the before and after pictures. Newmarket, the high school, it was first built in 1925. And it's a beautiful building, but we've had to add to it, cobble along over the decades. And it came to the point where something else had to be done. Even the elementary school, which was built in the 90s, all of a sudden we had a boom. We were using modular classrooms for about 30 years. And I know there are modular classrooms in many communities across the state. That's not how education should be done. It's not a long-term solution. So again, I want you to pass the bill, but I want you to consider the amendments that you'll be offered when you're in that work session. Amendments that would bring back the retroactive funding and maybe reconsider the 80-20. That may work fine in some cases, but we won't be able to do very many of the projects if we're putting 80% up front for all of them. Bond rates are very low right now. This is the time to do it. I realize that we got into trouble with bonding years ago when so many high schools were done all at once. And so, of course, if we hadn't done them then, they would be costing even more now. I've been inside some of those schools, and they have stadiums, they have auditoriums that rival the Wang Center. So we should also look at what defines a school. I know defining an education has been challenging, but what's a school building, and should we pay for all the extras if a community has the resources and is willing to spend the money for the bells and whistles? Then perhaps they should do that, and we should be funding schools that meet the needs of our community. And I'll gladly take any questions you have.
Does anyone have any questions that they would like to ask? Representative Heath?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your testimony, Michael. So you're asking a couple of things from us this morning. You're asking us to support House Bill 594 as presented, and you're also asking us to consider an amendment that actually will be coming forward in the work session. And do you know the amount of funding that would be what you are looking for in the reimbursement for projects that have been completed prior to the moratorium being lifted? Do you have an amount that you are looking for
Yes.
that we would need to find in the budget?
Thank you, Representative Heath. Yes, according to the document that Ms. Clark provided, the building aid that the town spent, the project's cost $537,174,495. The state building aid that would have been provided would be $186,141,161. Give us 50 cents on the dollar. Do something. And if you want, I know you can't just write a check today, but spread it out while some of our taxpayers that are helping to pay this are still up above ground and breathing. Let's help them a little bit. I mean, the money that you give to us, we could lower our tax rates. We could, again, be putting money aside for some of those other education things down the road. And I think it's the right thing to do rather than just walk away and say, well, you're out of luck, all these communities that we all live in and hope to have children educated in.
Madam Chair, may I inquire further, please?
Yes, you may.
Now, this bill would restore funding to the $50 million level. But my question to you is, I completely think the 10-year plan is an excellent idea. However, I also understand that, number one, our budget, we're trying to figure it out, and the amount that you're looking for may not be realistic. But in the 10-year plan, we can't go back to building aid as it used to, because we're still paying off the tail, and it just ended up a serious problem. And that's back in 2010. That's why we had ended, I think it was actually 2008. I'm not sure of the date. We actually had to bond the payment for building aid because there just wasn't enough money to balance the budget. Now, in the 10-year plan, are we going to look at a different way to approve building projects, much like what CTE does, where they put school districts in a queue? And then when that time period comes up, then in fact, a project can either be approved at the local level or but the school district knows when their turn is coming up. Is that what you're looking for? I don't know. That's why I'm asking.
Thank you, Representative. Yeah, I think the CTE is a good model, and I'm glad you brought that up because a few of the communities that did build, Salem and Dover, had the benefit of having CTEs, which also had the benefit of federal money. And wouldn't that be nice? The other thing with the list is that, you know, we have a list of projects and we don't know, someone might come in next year and say, well, we've been holding off, we couldn't do it. And now our school is really worse than the top three. So I think it might be good to have a plan. I'm hoping there would be enough funding so that we could do not just one school every 20 years or every, you know, but with some frequency in a group of schools. This is why I think we just have to know that this money has to be there, and we can't be taking it out with a clever use of a notwithstanding when you write the budget. You know, the money has to be there and has to come from somewhere. So because right now, the other document I sent you is the summary of the new market bond payment. If you look at that, you know, we're looking at $61,368,069.53 that we're paying for this, the whole thing, because the state reneged. So I'm sympathetic to the bond question. I know on finance, you guys are the experts and figure all the numbers. I don't know what it would have been. You know, I know it would have been less if we paid us the 30% we were due. If you gave us 80% up front, and that would have been great. But you have to do something. We can't just continue like this.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Are there further questions for Representative Cahill? I'd like to just make a statement, if I could. The reason that we changed to the 80-20 methodology was because bond issue after bond issue after bond issue around the state was failing. And so the legislature believed that if we were able to provide the 80 upfront with the 20 at the end, that we would see more bond issues passing. Now, I realize, I believe in the last budget cycle, we were fortunate that our economy was such that we had I don't want to call it extra money, but we had money available to do some of the things that we wanted to do, and we want to do every year. I mean, or every 2 years. I am also, I think, dismayed about the fact that we have not been able to support the building aid program. But when you look at the budget and the money that's available, you have to make decisions. And unfortunately, I think that is the position that we are in this cycle. I am a little concerned, or I won't argue that 50 million probably is a relatively good figure, but we're struggling right now to fill an $18 million gap in the Education Trust Fund. The other issue that I have is that in the last biennium, building aid went into the Education Trust Fund, and your bill, as it stands right now, moves it out of the Education Trust Fund and back into the general fund, where it was before. And so I have some real concerns about that. I think that what we have seen over the last 4 years, anyhow, is that the Education Trust Fund has been relatively healthy, whereas the general fund has had some significant problems. And this year in particular, the general fund has a huge problem. And so I just wanted to make that information available to the committee as well as anybody that might be listening. Representative Heath.
Oh, Madam Chair, thank you. Thank you so much for bringing that up. That was an issue that we really worked hard on in the last biennium, and we thought that it would give building aid actually more protection and then relieve the stress on the general fund. So I would hope that we would in fact leave the building aid within the context of the Education Trust. I thank you for that.
Okay, you're welcome.
Madam
Represent.
Chair. Yep.
Go ahead, Representative Cahill.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I defer to your experience and wisdom on these matters of which kettle the money should come in and out of. And I do appreciate, the circumstances we find ourselves in. And however, I also know that, when we think about, the young families that we want to have come and stay in New Hampshire, that, if they had to have 80% down in order to buy a home ownership would be nowhere. And so while I don't like debt, I don't like paying interest. If it's just something that we have to accept and plan for, the alternative is not fixing our schools, not fixing our bridges. And so that's what I'm like. But I do thank you, and I trust the committee will do its best to honor our commitments. Thank you very again.
Okay, thank you. For the people, please remember to raise your hand if you want to speak. And I see that Representative Hill has his hand raised.
Yes, Madam Chair. I'll try to be brief here. This is a big topic, and I think it's maybe the reason that this bill cries out for being retained. I am the chair of the aforementioned School Building Authority, have been for, I think I'm on my second or third year now. This is a project that needs reform. And I'll try to give you a couple of small pieces for the committee to consider. The 12 projects that the sponsor mentioned earlier, I think if I highlight some of these, you'll see some of the difficulties that we have with school building aid. One of the major problems that I see is that these projects can be applied for in June or July, actually. And it's possible that they have never been approved by the local districts, the local voters. So, Amy Clark at DOE, the School Building Authority, the Board of Ed, and now you all have to put time, effort, and energy into evaluating projects that the voters may not even want. In fact, one Sunapee project this year, just this last week, was voted down by the voters. So all of Amy's work to evaluate that project is pretty much wasted. And that, cheap Yankee here, I'm not happy about wasting time and money. But then we get into, so that's a big problem. And I think right now we have 6 and possibly 7 of the 12 projects that are in that category have no voter approval. There's another 3 or 4 here that are going before the voters and have no contingency built in for building aid. So the assumption is if it passes in that town meeting, then they will be building it regardless of building aid. We have the 3 major projects have already been approved by the voters and have said that they are building it with or without building aid. I have a hard time thinking about the poor voters of, I don't know, Lisbon or Berlin or somewhere like that, paying for a project in Salem when the Salem and Nashua voters have said, we're going to build this with or without building aid. So I have a hard time having others chip in for a project like that. Then we get into the project that was rated the first on the list, which happens to be my district, believe it or not. But it was built on a faulty demographic study. So the project itself, when it came to Amy Clark, was an expansion of an elementary school that the demographic study pointed out to increased demographics, student demographics. They've since been unable to replicate that demographic study, and they've shown decreased populations. Well, here we go again. Amy is evaluating a project that was faultily approved or applied for in the first place. So I think I'll leave it there. There's a number of problems with this project, with this process. Not the least of which is the timeline, and that gets to that voter approval or not. I think a few of us could sit down for a month and come up with a better solution than what we have here, just increasing the amount of money going to building aid. If I had my druthers, and I don't, as the chair of the school building authority, I have no ability to say this is not a good project for the taxpayers and voters of New Hampshire. I have only the ability to rank the projects. That's kind of a tough position to be in when we have an authority that is populated with the state fire marshal, the state treasurer, the commissioner of education, another person in finance who happens to be me, and another a building authority. That all of us are quote unquote experts in our field, but all we have the ability to do is check Amy Clark's math on the matrix of ranking these projects with available points. It's the 10-year plan is a great idea. I'll absolutely go for that. I think that's been a suggestion right from the get-go. But the idea of increasing the building aid just because of the request to do something, that's not the right way to go as far as I go. And I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Hill. Honorable Mr. McGuire, you have a comment or a question?
Well, I just wanted to give sort of testimony on this bill. All right.
Go ahead.
Get rid of the hand there. So first of all, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for welcoming me back to Division 2, which was my original committee when I was in the legislature 10 years ago and before I got sucked into the bottomless hole of Division 3. So today I'm a member of the board of Granite State Taxpayers. So what I'm talking about is endorsed or on behalf of Granite State taxpayers. And I agree with Representative Cahill that our demographics is definitely an issue. New Hampshire, depending on how you measure, is either the second oldest or perhaps the sixth oldest state in the country. And but I question whether building schools is the best way to solve that problem. Just in general, he told a story about there was a district that wanted to build a $25 million school, it wasn't approved, and later the voters approved a lesser project. Now, it seems to us, or to me, that this is entirely appropriate, because when you subsidize something like this particular area subsidizes schools, you end up with more of it. That's simple economics. So, and this is a problem with government financing in general. When one level of government hands a lower level of government money, that lower level will spend whatever it is that they can afford to spend on that item, plus all the stuff that they got handed. So the net result of this program is that more schools will be built than would happen otherwise, than would happen if the same entity that was making the decision to build schools was the one paying for it. And that's not to say that you couldn't still, I mean, if you have $50 million burning a hole in your pocket, you can't help out towns, right? A really trivial way to help out towns is simply to lower the statewide property tax by $50 million. If you wanted to be slightly more sophisticated and do it by student, you could help out towns by raising the adequate education aid 5%. And that would be another way to spend $50 million on education. But it would be done without the negative consequences of overbuilding, right? And you know, I realize that probably people who build large commercial structures would not like that, right? They want to build stuff, but otherwise it would be roughly the equivalent, and you would get schools right-sized for their purpose. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Representative Porter, you have a question?
I do. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm trying to kind of get my head around this. It was mentioned that there were communities that were passing bonds with or putting a project up with or without state funding. And it seemed to me the implication was the state funding was superfluous, and it didn't matter, that the state should not be funding projects that would be funded anyway by the community. And I'm wondering if rather we should be looking at it as this funding has been so sporadic, unreliable, and meager in the last years that communities who know they need to repair their school or upgrade their school or build a new one because the one they have is falling down are willing to realize their responsibility to take it on with or without state funding. So I'm just throwing that out there as maybe you can explain it to me why that would be a negative for giving building aid to a community if they're willing to build without it. Does that make any sense? Did I make any sense with that?
Yes, you made sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Did I ask a question?
No.
I'm sorry.
Representative Heath, I understand you have a proposed amendment to this bill, and I think everyone received it. I hope you did. Would you like to say something about this?
I do. The purpose of the amendment is to address the concerns that Representative Cahill brought up for reconsideration toward those projects to some extent that have not been funded, and take that under consideration.
Okay. Okay, let me make sure I'm understanding what you're saying. Basically, in paragraph 3, which is the new paragraph,
Yes.
this is the that's saying that projects between July 13th and 2020
Yes.
may be considered.
Yes.
Okay. And you are looking at a 20% award, if that's the right
Yes.
term for those back projects.
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Raise your hand, please. Thank you.
Sorry about that. I do not have a copy of this amendment. When was it sent, and was it sent prior to me being put on the committee? Bob doesn't either, it looks like.
I will send, I'll send the amendment to the entire committee now, and I'll also post it online. But I can also share a screen if that's useful to at least walk through the amendment.
Actually, Michael, that would be very helpful.
Thank you.
Mickey.
It's very hard with amendments right now because
It is.
We don't know whether the person is going to offer them or not. And so I have tried to make sure that I got these out to everybody, but maybe I didn't. Okay.
Let's
So
look at Section 3.
Section 3 is up there. Basically, if I understood correctly, 4, you're also talking about a new paragraph on the 10-year plan,
Yes.
which is 2. So let's go to 2 first, and then we'll go to 3.
So
The importance of the 10-year plan, I think, is critical. And I know that Amy is out here, and I'd like her to perhaps even give some feedback to that. But I just think by having a plan, it puts us in a mode that we have a better handle on the needs that are out there and the things that we need to have in place to make this work. Because of the fact we know we cannot go back to the system the way it was previously. So I think if we put together a 10-year plan, then we're going to be able to plan, we can budget, and we have order in terms of where we're going with building aid across the state of New Hampshire.
Mary,
Yes.
Amy, would you like to comment on the concept of a 10-year plan?
Sure. For the record, Amy Clark with the Department of Education, School Safety and Facility Management. Yeah, I think the feedback from schools are that they can't move forward with building a school is not something you do over a weekend. It's not even something you do in a year's time. It typically takes 2 to 5 years to plan for a large school construction project. But the uncertainty of building aid puts schools, especially poorer schools, at a disadvantage because they have to spend maybe in the realm of $100,000 or so for planning for construction. Really allows the state to start planning its resources a little bit better instead of just saying, oh, here's some money, who's up for it? And then you get the schools that are building anyway. To Representative Hill's point of some schools are moving forward with construction anyhow. That's not the case with all schools on that list. Some schools that were ranked did not even vote on building aid because their projects because they were uncertain about building aid, where a 10-year plan really gives everybody an idea of when they're up next, should funding be available.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes, please, go ahead.
I am a former, I used to work at the Department of Ed, and I also was an assistant superintendent, and passing a bond is extraordinarily hard. And I referred to the CTE process they have in our capital budget and how well it works, because it gives you that time period when you know that your district will be coming up for an award, that you have time to work with your community, you have time to do the work you need to do in order to get it funded. It's not an easy task. And for many of us who have worked in districts, we know that to get any kind of a bond passed, it can take up to 2 or 3 years coming before the budget, the town committees to get those plans in fact approved. So the 10-year plan, I think, is a logical sequence, and it puts in place a structure within which we in the budget committee can work, and those folks at the district level can work as well. It provides order and a structure that will keep us from falling into that unfortunate situation of having a tail that's been driving us for the last few years. Thank you.
Okay, is there anyone else that would like to comment on the concept of the 10-year plan? Let me say that I attended, I don't know, some CTE committee that I'm on for the state. And they are very concerned about the rotation and what's going on in that arena. So even though they have a plan, one of the problems that they've had is that the school districts that are up for the CTE money are not approving the projects.
Right.
So it doesn't matter whether there's a plan or there's not.
Right.
It's unfortunately sometimes voters are very strange. I'll put it that way. So, okay, Representative Lynn, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And I guess I direct this to whoever sort of has knowledge of the operation of the plan, because candidly, I'm ignorant, and I want to learn what this is about. But here's, am I understanding that the way the proposed 10-year plan would work would be that the Department of Education would sort of survey the state and say, okay, here are, and I'm just using this, picking this number out of the air, but say, okay, here are 10 school districts in which new building of one kind or another is appropriate, and we're going to rank the order in which we, the Department of Education, thinks that these should be approved. Is that kind of the idea? Because I guess one of the things I'm having trouble understanding is how that, and it sort of goes along with what Representative Umberger was just saying about the CTE program, is how does, if that's what the idea of what the State Department of Education is supposed to do, if that's the idea, I kind of wonder how that, if that doesn't interfere in some sense with local control, in the sense that, suppose that, you know, a district where the State Department of Education might think that it's high on its list of a district where approval should be given, but there's a great debate within the town about whether this should be done or not. Is the Department of Education's placing it on the list kind of putting a hand on the scale there to tip the vote one way or the other? And is that a good idea? I guess that's really my question in the end.
Okay. Amy, do you want to answer that, or is there somebody else here that
I can. This is Representative Hill.
Okay.
So I think Representative Lynn has an excellent point and does point out one of the problems with the idea of a 10-year plan. And I have seen it in action. There is an effect of putting your thumb on the scale in the current system as well. I have seen districts, because they came on this matrix and the ranking near the top of the list, that it was put to the voters to the effect, see, The state thinks that this is a good project and are willing to pay for it. So therefore, you should vote for it because the state thinks it's a good project. So that is something to be aware of. You know, it also is difficult, and I agree with Chairman Umberger tremendously here, because bricks and mortar are a hard thing to push through in good times, and yet we're in a position here now where we've had school buildings be empty for a year, and people aren't sure whether their children will be back in their schools in their regular form. They're also see the statement from the Commissioner of Education that says for schools to prepare for future significant declines in population. So you can see that they're hesitant to outlay for a building that's going to have to be there for 20 years, because there is an RSA, a piece in the RSA that says if this building isn't used by the end of the duration of this, that building aid could be returned or have to be returned. I don't know if that's ever taken place, but certainly it's an overhanging issue. So all of those reasons, I agree wholeheartedly with Representative Lynn that it's a question that needs to be answered.
Representative Heath, you have a question?
I do. I just kind of a follow-up. I fully understand the need for a plan. And I also want to add that it doesn't put the thumb on the scale of a school district simply because a district would then be eligible for a building project, but it allows them to do some planning if in need. That's something in their long-term plan. There's no requirement that they have to do this. And there are school districts, yes, I completely agree. Enrollment numbers across the state are declining, but we do have districts that are growing, in fact. Wyndham, for example, is exploding. Bedford has seen extraordinary growth. The need for building aid remains. I think we recognize that the pandemic is hopefully moving to a conclusion. Our students will be returning to school, and there continues to be needs that buildings have in order to move forward. So I just want to protest a little bit the fact that the thumb on the scale, because it does not try in any way to usurp local control. It simply is adding a plus to what a school district can put into their plans that they are building. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I see that Representative Cahill has a question as well.
Right. Representative Hill, you had some comments that you wanted to make or questions? Then I will go to Representative Cahill.
No, I'm sorry, I just didn't drop my hand. I apologize.
No problem. Representative Cahill?
Thanks very much, Madam Chair. To Representative Hill's statement, I recall, like, I think it was my first term, that Lancaster's turn came up for CTE at a renovation, and they turned it down. So it's not, you know, the voters still had the final word. And I also want to add that if not for the renovation that we did here in Newmarket, I don't think we'd have been able to have all our students in the elementary school with, you know, allowing for the social distancing. That we did that. And our junior high and senior, you know, junior and senior high school was operational nearly all the time, except for a couple of exposure incidents, because we expanded both buildings. And if we weren't able to do that, it would be a different situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Heath, would you like to go on to paragraph 3, please?
Yes. So in paragraph 3, what this does is it opens up an opportunity, if funds allow, to reimburse at the rate of 20% those school districts who have indeed gone forward with local building projects during the period of the moratorium. And I think it's something that if indeed funds became available, that this would be something to try and at least take a step forward to make some of these districts partially whole in terms of what has been asked for them. And I think that Representative Cahill has certainly spoke in depth at what the town of Newmarket has experienced. They had a need, they had to go forward. And there are many school districts that won't meet our state minimum standards unless they go forward with a building. I know that when I worked as deputy commissioner, we had a number of local school districts that because of the condition of their buildings, that they could not get approval and they were safety hazards. So something had to be done. So I think based on the years that we've seen come before us, that the state does have some potential obligation to try and do something if it would become possible. But, you know, I have to say that indeed, I believe that the most important thing is to reestablish full funding in each year of the biennium for building aid. And secondly, the 10-year plan or a plan to refigure. And that will be people coming together to figure out what the plan's going to be under the wise leadership of Amy. So, I mean, these are all things that are critically important to our state. And schools are not going to go away. We're going to continue to have needs across our state. Schools are a fundamental core of our cities and towns, and they will continue to be. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Is there anyone else that has any comments or questions? Yes, Amy.
If I may, I just want to make two what I think are important points is keep in mind, I oftentimes hear about space and cost and declining enrollment and all of that thing. Keep in mind that the current law already caps the square footage per student, and it caps the cost of construction. So there are lots of large spaces that some local school districts build. But if you look at the cap of square footage per student, it is typically smaller than what schools are proposing. So, so that's one point. And then the other point is really that special education space is much different. I will say that there is potentially, like when you go in and look at schools, there might be some spaces that used to be empty, but special education spaces are somewhat significant in schools. So those would be the only 2 points I wanted to make sure that were available. Thank you.
You're muted, Madam Chair.
Well, I know that's because I was thinking in my thoughts. I have two thoughts here. Okay. My first thought is on the 10-year plan. Okay. I've heard the arguments on both sides of it, but there's, in my opinion, nothing wrong with planning. I'm not sure that I agree that if you're building a brand new project, it's going to take you 5 years to get it together. But I'm not sure how good school boards are at planning for the long term. I know that all of us, have issues with long-term planning, but I am personally not opposed to the concept of the 10-year plan. I think we have a reality check in regards to any funding for this program for this year, this biennium. And so the question that I have is, if people agree, does it make sense to change 594 to only include the incorporation of a 10-year plan and, and eliminate all the others? Or does it make sense, would you prefer to retain the entire bill to try to work on, what we can do about school building aid? I don't expect, Mary, you had that money tree growing out there in your backyard. Okay, so those are my thoughts. Okay, and I would just like to hear from people about, which is the best, because I know all of us know that we cannot fund this at this time. So, Representative Heath.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your comments. I would not have a problem at all with it being retained. I know that in the last biennium, we worked together, and there were a lot of these kinds of bills that we were able to get into the budget. And that would be my preference, because I think we'd have to go there eventually anyway. So if we were to retain it, I would not have a problem with it. I also don't want the bill to be ITL'd if in fact the amendment were not accepted. And just to put out there, I also have a second amendment that Mickey had worked on that took out the 20% payment back to schools. So that would be something that certainly I would entertain too. But number one, I'd be happy to have the amendment included as written with the funding opportunities back to completed projects. But if that becomes a too serious a liability, then I would withdraw that section. But I do think the consideration of full funding for building aid and the 10-year plan are two critical elements in long-term for building aid. And if we could do something with that, I would be most pleased.
If I may, just to clarify, the 10-year plan is already in House Bill 594 as amended and passed
by education. Yeah.
So that's already in the bill. The only change in the amendment that we walked through was section 3. And you are on mute, Representative Umberger.
Representative Heath?
Yes.
Is that a motion to retain?
I would move to retain House Bill 594. Yes.
Okay, do I have a second, and then we'll have discussion?
I'll second that.
Representative Petrie?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, I had my hand up, but it's not to do with, I obviously can't vote on this, but I had my hand up to clarify one thing.
Yes, absolutely. I was going to call on you next.
Okay, thank you. I do like the 10-year plan. I'm not sure, there's a cost to that, obviously, and I'm not sure what that cost is. I've never heard a cost associated with making this 10-year plan, but I'm sure it's not inconsiderable. The other part of this, and I'd hate to see a district like Allenstown, who voted for this just recently, at least that's my understanding, and we're talking about the state portion of their project being 19 million, which along with the tail keeps it under the or roughly the 50 million that we're currently dealing with for building aid. I just want to, and I'm not even sure if the 19 million is possible in this current budget climate, but I wanted to, but I wanted to make sure that I at least put in a plug to say, of all of the 12 projects that are here from my position as the chair of the School Building Authority, that one ticks the boxes. You know, I'm cognizant that this year the Hall of Fame in baseball didn't include anyone, and I understand that that can happen. But this is a matrix that needs to be worked on. As far as retaining the bill, that would be a great piece of it, as well as all of the other items that I mentioned, the timeline especially. So I would have no problem retaining, but I only have those two issues, the cost of the 10-year plan and that one project of Allenstown that is in that 60% category, meaning that they are a community in need. So they're the only 60% project that we have, and they are the one that went to the district with a contingency that they would only do this if building aid existed, which indicates to me that that building aid is important to that district. So that's my plug. I'll drop out.
Okay, thank you very much, Representative Hill. Representative Murray?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I support the retain, but I have I think is a technical question. There was a discussion, I'm looking at line 6 in the original bill and line 8 in the other bill. It's the same thing, but we talked about this money was moved to the Education Trust Fund, I believe, and in the bill it's referring to the state operating budget. Is that something that we need to change before we retain or do something with?
No. We can work all of that in the retained category.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, seeing no further questions or Representative Cahill, you want to say something?
Yes, thank you very much for indulging me, Madam Chair. Again, I did anticipate that because this is a very complicated issue, the bill would be retained, and hopefully during that period, revenues will continue to climb and perhaps the hole will be a little bit less deep. But I also wanted to add, as far as the retroactive, many of the schools, including Newmarket, also had those kind of issues, overcrowding, unsafe conditions, fire and life safety. So we checked a lot of boxes. We just didn't get a check. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So the motion on the table or on the floor, whatever, is to retain HB 594 FN. The motion was made by Representative Heath, yes, and seconded by Representative Petrie. So Representative Lynn, could you please call the roll?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Petrie.
Petrie votes yes.
Representative, well, I guess I'm sorry. I guess I'm next, and I also vote yes. Representative Porter.
Yes.
Hang on 1 second. Thank you. Representative Heath.
Heath votes yes, and I thank you for the opportunity to continue this conversation.
Thank you. Representative Murray.
Murray votes yes.
Representative Turcott.
Representative Turcott votes yes.
And Representative Umberger.
Representative Umberger votes yes.
All right, the vote is 2, 3, 4, 7 to nothing in favor, so it passes.
Okay, thank you. I am not sure when Full Finance is going to have their executive session on these, but I do thank you all for agreeing to retain this bill. I think there's some good points in it, and maybe we can get Mary's money tree to grow a little bit faster than what we have at this point. Okay, so we are now turning to, let me get my stuff together here. To HB 613. Okay, Representative Hill, let's go ahead, Representative Porter, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a real newbie question, so please forgive my ignorance. When working up the revenue estimates for this budget, were the proposed tax cuts that the governor asked for included as part of that revenue estimate, or are those in the future so they're not included?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe they were included in the revenue estimates.
That's correct. The base revenues under current law are stated, and then any changes to tax rates, tax law, anything that would affect revenues are carried on the surplus statement as a revenue adjustment. So all those changes are accounted for.
Okay, can I have a follow-up?
Certainly.
So we're working with figures that are under the influence of any negative influence of COVID, and then additionally reduced by the cuts that are made to the tax rates. So that's why our numbers are where they are.
I think the estimates from the tax cut did not reduce the income, the revenue by any significant amount. I think the governor was very, he felt very strongly, as did the folks working on the budget, that with the tax cuts, it would not affect the revenues. And I don't have them just handy right here, yes. But
so there's been enough of a rebound then.
Yes, that's.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, let's see. On turning to 613, Representative Hill.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay, did you want to talk about this? I know you had said that you had some amendments to this, but nothing has gotten to Mickey from LOS.
Neither to me as well. I had promised I would get it to you as soon as I received it from OLS. I have not seen it, but it really is not critical to our discussion today. It can certainly be handled on the Senate side if the bill gets that far.
Well, except that the last thing I saw is that you were deleting, and again, you know, all references to
the original bill.
Yeah, in the state education, special education state aid, which was changing it from 3.5 to 2.5. But anyhow, right. I'll let you, if you don't mind, I'll let you talk about this bill. And
I don't mind at all. I appreciate the opportunity to. The original bill, this really could be two bills. One part, which you correctly just pointed out, is the special education state aid, is the first full page and probably a third of the second page. That is written to expand the formula of how many children qualify for at least some state funding. That was the original bill. The second part of the bill came in as an amendment, and that was primarily because the information that came from the actuary that the DOE hired, the report and the tool came in December, and it was after the time that a separate bill could be written. So it was merely amended onto this bill. So the new amendment that we just talked about, the goal was to try to get rid of the original language for expanding the formula of how many children qualify. That didn't seem to fix the problem that we're trying to address, and that problem is something that school districts all recognize. The problem when high-cost special ed children move into a district after the school district's budget is set. Districts worry about this situation, and they put away money into rainy day capital reserve accounts. Just last year, 117 districts put away $6 million into these types of accounts. This part of HB 613 lets districts create municipal risk pools of the type that are shown in RSA 5B. Municipal risk pools are so common that they have a national association called AGRIP for some reason. I'm not sure what that acronym means. I spoke with the executive director to see if any of her members used municipal risk pools for special ed costs. She didn't think any of them did, but she was very excited about the prospect and promised her organization's support. Most municipal risk pools, and in fact, the three that are currently operating in New Hampshire, are health insurance oriented. Risk pools in New Hampshire are overseen by the Secretary of State, specifically the Director of Securities, who I also spoke with. He said that the RSA would need to be changed to allow special ed to be an approved use. This bill does that. The director said the association's lawyers would draft their own documents spelling out the parameters of the risk pool, and that would be the governing document that he would oversee. He said he would first make sure that the risk pool followed the parameters of the existing RSA. The key reason we are enthusiastic about risk pools in New Hampshire is because of the analysis done by our actuaries from our own Department of Insurance. The analysis showed that even though school districts can show wide fluctuations in yearly costs, the fact remains that the costs remain fairly predictable statewide. The actuary from the department is on this Zoom call to explain more about this phenomenon. Predictability is a good thing if associations are going to seek third-party insurance coverage, or perhaps they may choose to still self-insure. We had on the Zoom call as well, who just sent me a note saying she had to leave for another meeting, is the vice president of the actuary firm that was hired by the DOE last year to do further analysis of our historical special ed data and build us what we call a special ed cost predictor, which is something that the DOE now has in its possession. This tool will help the risk pools accurately determine how much money they will need to be paid into member district school districts to cover their concerns of unexpected and unreimbursed special ed costs. It's a very easy tool to use. One page of inputs, one page of outputs, and it's all in common use language. I've provided the committee a sample from the town of Haverhill, which is Rick Ladd's district. This tool helps immediately because it would guide districts to suggest how much the district needs to have in their rainy day self-insurance pool. As it stands now, districts don't know whether the money they are putting away in these rainy day accounts is too much or too little. Some districts have millions in these accounts, and one district has $46. They have no idea how much they need. This tool works now, but it would need to be updated with the data the DOE already collects. For privacy reasons, the DOE needs to be the point person for updating this cost predictor tool. And I think that gives you a basis for what House Bill 613 can do. I'll be happy to answer questions, but perhaps the actuary on the line can also answer any technical questions. His name is Chris Citarella, and I think I saw him listed in the participants list. I'm all set.
Okay. Dan, did you want to testify or did you have a, okay, then I will let, if you don't mind, I will let our committee members ask questions of Representative Hill as well as Mr. Citarelli. I think he's up someplace.
There he is.
All right, great. So Representative Heath, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I don't necessarily have a problem with any of this, actually. It's an interesting concept, and I think the potential is there. My concern is that we've not had a public hearing on this element. And, you know, just working with local school districts, this is an issue that every school district has. And they may very well be in favor of it and want it. I just don't know. And I see that we have the person from the department here, but we don't have any, I don't see anybody in the audience from local school districts. So that's, I just wanted to put my concern that this is, and it deviates from the usual practice that we've had in place for many, many years. I just think it would be nice to hear from other places in terms of what they feel about moving in this direction. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Thank you for your question. The bill did have a hearing in House Education. It drew pretty much the same comments in that this is a new idea. I want to specifically stress that this is enabling legislation. This merely makes it possible for districts to evaluate on their own, band together, create a risk pool, draw their own document, and have that overseen by the Director of Securities in the Secretary of State's office. It is not anything. It was brought up that this needs to be studied more. We've had 2.5 years or so of studying with the help of the Department of Insurance, as well as the outside actuaries that the Department of Education hired. We have the report. I'm happy to make the report available to you. It is an idea that is new for this purpose, but it is an old idea for the idea of solving problems within municipalities. It's really not much different than what we do with mutual aid for fire districts currently. Mutual aid is where several districts agree to cover each other if there is a fire in a different area. This is somewhat on that same idea that districts would band together and agree to help out and insure each other on the event that some unrecognized event happens after their school district has been set in stone.
Thank you, Representative Hill. Representative Turcott, you have a question?
I do. Good morning, Representative Hill. I don't know if this is for you or maybe Christian later. 3 points that I'd ask you to maybe get back with me. Probably don't need to do it right here. Number one, what is the definition of a special ed student? I know it sounds basic, but I'm pretty new at this stuff. Currently in New Hampshire, how many special ed students qualify? And then my third question, these are all kind of data points for me, I guess, is say in the last 10 years, what has been the increase in the number of special ed students in New Hampshire? And that's it. Thank you.
I actually think Chris would be the perfect guy for those questions. If it's possible that we pull him up, or how would you like to do this, Madam Chair?
He's up already.
Uh,
Mickey, excuse me just a second. Was that part, the questions that Representative Turcott, was that part of what DOE provided to us in that stack?
It could be, but I do have Rebecca Fredette from the department here who put that information together to answer any questions specific to it, if she'd like to respond.
Okay, Rebecca, I'd love for you to respond if you would.
Sure. So a definition of a special education student would be any student that is identified under IDEA as a student in need of special education due to a disability as outlined in IDEA. Currently, we have, I don't have the exact number right in front of me, unfortunately. I'm working from home and didn't get it pulled up, but it is just over 30,000 in the entire state right now. If we're looking at just special education aid and those that meet CAP, last year we had 742 students who applied for special education aid. So those are those students that have those high cost needs that we're talking about here with Representative Hill's information. And they met CAP which was set at $59,217. And so their costs went above that amount. And then your next question was, I think the next one was the numbers.
Excuse me.
Sure.
That was at the 3.5%. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes. And
3.5 times rather than 3.5%.
Yes, I apologize. It is 3.5 times. Yep.
I'm sorry. Yes, it's times.
And then the increase for this increase of special ed students over the past 10 years. So in 2010, we had 1,154 students apply for special education aid. And at that point, the cap was $41,060.84. Does that answer your questions, Representative Turcott?
Pretty much. The first one on the definition, is there some place that I can actually look at that, or is that something you can cut and send to me?
Sure, I can find that information for you. Yes.
Thank you very much.
It might help Representative Turcott to know there's 13 different special ed categories that students fit into. I see Representative Heath smiling here. I think she probably had a hand in putting those together. But so I feel a little silly asking at the feet of the master here. But it is each of those in this cost predictor tool, the students are identified in which of those categories or multiple categories that they fall into. And so that cost predictor takes that very private information and puts it into this Excel spreadsheet that provides the estimated cost.
Great, thank you.
Sorry. Mr.
Citarella.
Citarella, yeah. I had turned it over on the back. So did you have anything you wanted to add to this?
I really don't. I don't want to take any more time. I think Representative Hill did a fine job explaining. I'll just say that my role was, I'm a property and casualty actuary at the New Hampshire Insurance Department. Commissioner Edelblut and Representative Hill came to me about, what is it now, about at least 2 years ago. He said, do you think this is an insurable risk? And there is no insurance product out there right now that handles this type of situation. And, I'm hesitant to say that it is a traditional insurable risk from the property and casualty side and the idea of a liability. Just to make a long story short, I did an analysis and it does appear, as the representative said, it does appear to be fairly stable in aggregate. And there appear to be some predictors as to what would drive costs for an individual district. And so it appears as if a risk pool would work in this situation. And so I did as I said, I did a high level analysis and reported that back, recommended that they go to a more experienced firm that dealt with, because it does have more tendencies or more characteristics of a life or a health product rather than a property and casualty product. And this tool, I've looked at the tool, and I will say it is a good tool. It is a good cost predictor. So data that was provided.
Thank you. Rebecca, are you the person that would manage or update this data system?
So Greg, Representative Hill would have to give the correct terminology for this, but we would put out an RFP to have this updated based on our data each year. So it wouldn't be my office that necessarily does it, but we would reach out again each year and have the data updated according to our numbers in special education.
Okay. Do we have a cost estimate on that, Representative Hill? Because I didn't see anything in here.
The estimate that was received, and that was the woman that was on the line that would be the person. She's the vice president of the actuary firm in Kansas. Lewis and Ellis is the actuary firm. She would be the logical one to, since they built this cost predictor, she would be the logical one to provide future updates for it. She gave me only a verbal off the cuff saying, it would be less than half of what they paid to build the system. And it would also depend on what other changes the associations or the school districts wanted to see in the product. She was assuming that they were building it based on what they would like, but they had no idea whether it would be something that the districts wouldn't offer changes to in a current year. So she was hesitant to come out with a fixed price and say, here's what it would be. But it's set up in the bill that the DOE would do the RFP, would also handle the cost for that for the first 5 years, with the idea that that would be the setup time period. And then at that point, the associations that had been formed throughout the state would pick up the cost of that updating. That they figured this cost predictor works for about 3 years before the data is stale and needs to be updated. So that may or may not be helpful. I'm hopeful it is.
Okay, I've got all that, but we need, but there's always a but.
The number, I recall, the RFP was roughly $110,000 to build this. So I'm thinking if we were in the neighborhood of 50,000, I can't see we would be much more than 10% up or down on that.
Okay, well,
I can second that estimate there, having been in the prior to my current life, my current career, I was in the consulting worlds for actuarial services, and even half of the initial cost, I would say, is a high estimate.
Okay, so this would be 50,000 a year, is that correct?
50,000 whenever they update, and it doesn't have to be done on an annual basis. It can be done whenever the DOE determines that the numbers have significantly changed. So, the idea would be that there would be a 3-year contract or something like that with the RFP process. That was what the commissioner had talked about. So that once every 3 years, the data would be updated.
Thank you. Representative McGuire. Honorable Dan McGuire.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So again, I'm talking on behalf of Granite State taxpayers, and I'm only going to address the first part of the bill, the main part of the bill, not the pooling thing. I don't have anything to say on that subject. So the main part of the bill essentially just changes the formula by which the state helps localities with special ed aid. The way that works is there's this cutoff of $60,000. So the first $60,000 that it cost of a kid is entirely borne by locals. Then after that, up to, I think it's, I'm not sure, maybe 100
times. 10 times.
10 times, yeah. So it's about $170,000. The state pays, what is it, 70%, 60%?
80-20.
It's 80.
It's never 80-20, but that's the goal, okay?
Okay, so the goal is 80% of the intermediate, the amount between 60,000 and 170,000, and then greater than 170,000, the state pays 100%. So, and I believe that the total amount the state has been putting into this area over time is relatively flat. So it's not unreasonable to say, you know, due to inflation or whatever, that this area could be expanded slightly. And what this bill does is change that 60,000 number down to 45,000 or something like that, right? So that the place where the state aid kicks in is much lower. So that's not necessarily unreasonable, but one thing that you notice if you delve into this in more detail is that special ed spending is not at all uniform across the state in different municipalities. If you take what Manchester spends on average per student on special ed, or maybe what Manchester and Nashua spend as a baseline, sort of, you'll find that certain communities and even large communities spend much higher numbers than those, you know, per student. In particular, if you look at Merrimack, the town of Merrimack, which is about a third the size of Manchester, but its spending in this area, or what it receives from the state in this area, is something like 2/3 of what Manchester gets. So, you know, it's twice the rate of Manchester in some sense. And there are other towns like that, like Dover, possibly Salem, and others. So if you actually look at the details, you'll find that certain towns are overly generous, in my opinion, compared to the standard of what special ed should be. And I think the reason for that is that the Department of Ed has essentially zero control or influence over how much special ed spending is. I mean, I think they simply ask the question, how much did you spend? And they run through the formula and send a check. So I would think that in this area, if you want to change the formula to be state spends more, you could profitably add a handful of auditors to the Department of Ed who would periodically look at, you know, sample the special ed spending decisions of each town, and perhaps have the power to deny a fraction of their spending as far as being used in the formula. And that would pay for itself. I think you could spend, you know, you could do a certain amount of auditing, and you would end up not spending that, you know, not spending that much on this extra benefit. So that's my suggestion, and I see some hands raised, so I'm fully prepared to say that I'm wrong about that. But it's definitely the case that some towns are spending a lot more than others per pupil, and to the extent that it seems like if the state wants to put money in, it should require that towns make more uniform decisions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Representative Heath, you have your hand raised.
Oh, yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to mention that the cost that a school district incurs as a result of special education costs are driven by the individual student's IEP. And I think Rebecca can talk to the specifics of that, but it's not something that is whether or not a school district spends more or less per se, but that it's based on the federal legislation as well as our own state standards. It's based on the needs that have been articulated as a result of the team meetings based on the needs documented in the individual student's IEP. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Rebecca, would you like to comment on that at all?
Certainly. So I can briefly share with you the process we have for special education aid in our office. Each district that is applying for special education aid submits all of their paperwork to us by July 30th of each year. And then we hire up to 6 clerks in our office each year to review all of those submissions. And what we do is we to make the convoluted process a little shorter, we look at all of their submissions and invoices, and when we tie it back to a specific service within the student's IEP. So if they submit to us something for transportation, say, and we look at the IEP and it is not there, we would then deny that claim because it's not tied directly to a student's IEP. But we pick a number of districts each year that we do that for, and we review them intensively. We do for all of them, we don't review them intensively, but we do pick a certain number of them that we review intensely each year, and that's on a cyclical basis. So every 3 years, your district would come up and we would review your submissions to ensure that they tied back to each service within an individual student's IEP. And there are times that we do deny claims. If there isn't a documentation that that service was within the student's IEP, we would deny that claim, but that is only for students that are submitted to us. We don't do that for every district and every process for every student. It's only for those that are submitted to us for special education aid reimbursement. I hope that answers your question, Representative Umberger. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Representative Porter, you had a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's more of a comment. Is that all right?
I will let you make a short comment. How's that?
Thank you. Just for the record here, I have to agree with what Representative Heath said about the needs of the children and how much those needs cost versus just a general average. I know in our district, we have a very loving family who has adopted into their families 7 children with severe disabilities that cost the district a significant amount of money. And that's one reason why our costs might be higher than the neighboring community that does not have such a family there. And also one way that we have tried in Hillsborough to keep our costs down is by offering our own alternative programs here rather than having our students be scholarshiped out to other programs. And we invite other children to come into our programs in our town so that we can save the district money. So there are things that schools and school districts do that they have no control over, and there are some that they do have control over, but the amount that a district pays for its special ed students is determined by the needs of the students and not by having a Cadillac program that they're giving to everybody.
Honorable. I guess I'll just call you Dan. It's a lot easier.
Thank you.
I've been trying to remember all this. Thank you.
Yeah. So the point I was trying to make was not the level of auditing that was just described, that okay, a bill was submitted and therefore we checked that bill matches the IEP. What I'm talking about is in more detail than that. It's the creation of the IEP, because I don't think it's necessarily the case that that an identical student in one town is going to get the same IEP than in another town, right? The creation of the IEP is negotiation process among multiple individuals. And I would think, and it seems likely to me that that negotiation would have different results in different towns, and certain towns would be more expansive or generous, or however you want to say it, than others. And so if the state is putting money into this area, I would think it would want to take a sampling of IEPs and say, yes, you've produced this IEP reasonably, or no, you haven't, and have some control over it.
Thank you. Are there any more comments or questions at this point? Okay.
I have one comment, Madam Chair. I just received from OLS the amendment that we had talked about, so I have forwarded that to you and as well to the entire committee.
Okay, thank you.
Just came in.
Here's my thought process on this again. I think the concept of the insurance is interesting to explore. Okay. Unfortunately, we did not have the amendment as we were going through what we needed today. And so if I could have a motion to retain, that it would give us an opportunity to look further. And I think that Representative Hill has done a lot of work on this, but we don't have the information, I guess that's the right term, that he is holding in his head and on the papers. So I would appreciate if we could do that. Representative Heath, are you making the motion?
I am, Madam Chair. It's my pleasure to recommend that we retain House Bill 613.
Petrie seconds that.
Thank you. Are there any other comments that someone might have? Okay, seeing none, Representative Lynn, would you please call the roll?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Petrie.
Petrie votes yes.
Representative Lynn, I vote yes. Representative Porter.
Porter votes yes.
Representative Heath.
Heath votes yes.
Representative Murray.
Murray votes yes.
Representative Turcott.
Turcott votes yes.
And Representative Umberger.
Representative Umberger votes yes.
All right, so it's a 7-0 vote in the affirmative, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. And we will, once again, whenever the executive session occurs, we'll take that to the full Finance Committee. I really thank everybody for being here today. And I will say that although I read the bill, and I think this is an extremely interesting concept. And I don't know whether any of the communities would take up this insurance proposal, but it certainly is I think a viable option if they can find a carrier, because that'll be the next thing that would need to be done. So it is 11:50. We have to be back at 1 o'clock, and please use your Zoom links for House Finance. Is that correct, Mickey?
Yeah, you're going to want to use your full committee links, not the Division 2 links for this afternoon at 1.
Okay, so we will see you all at 1 o'clock. And I know that Representative Petrie, as the clerk for the full finance, will have his have his hands full. As I said to him yesterday, I was clerk at one time for finance, and these public hearings are a challenge, even in the best of times. And I'm not sure this is the best of times, but anyhow, so we'll see you all at 1 o'clock, and then tomorrow morning, we're back together at 10. Okay, so have a good afternoon listening, and thank you to everyone that joined our call today. Take care.